allegiance. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. This is the one meeting a year that I get to open the meeting, as it's our annual reorganization meeting for the Washington Township Board of Education. Adequate notice of this meeting was given to the public 48 hours in advance of the date, setting forth the date, time, location, and type of meeting. Notice was sent to the Daily Record, the Observer Tribune, and the Washington Township Clerk, and was posted on the district website at www.wtschools.org. All please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So, as I said, this is the reorganization meeting for the Board of Education. We're going to start with our reorganization items, and then we will move on to our regular agenda. So the first item of business on our reorg agenda is to report on the annual school election and to welcome Carmine Capagrasso, Cindy Ruggiero, and Rob Blaskus to the board. And I now have the pleasure of swearing in Cindy and Rob. So if they would join me up front. Yep. Okay, we now move on to the second portion of the reorg, which is to elect our officers for the evening. Do I have a motion to nominate the board president?
I have,
Carmine?
I would like to nominate Jessica DeSico.
Do we have any other motions to nominate board president? Cindy?
I would like to nominate Rob Blaskus.
Do we have any other nominations for board president? Okay, do I have a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're going to do a roll call vote for president. We will go in the order that they were nominated. Is that how we do that?
So roll call for Jessica. Mr. Capagrosso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo? Yes. Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
No.
Mrs. Muserino? Yes. Mrs. Ruggiero?
No.
Mr. Waskis?
No.
Ms. Wilson? Yes. And roll call for Mr. Waskis. Mr. Capagrosso?
No.
Mrs. DeSico?
No.
Mrs. DeMayo?
No.
Mr. Costenblatt?
No.
Mrs. Mitchell?
No.
Mrs. Muserino? No. Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskis?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Okay, so resolved that in accordance with NJSA 18A 15-1, the Washington Township Board of Education in the County of Morris, New Jersey, elects Jessica DeSico as President of the Board of Education effective January 4th, 2022, for a term prescribed by law. Mrs. DeSico, would you like to continue on with the Board Vice President, or would you like me to do that on your behalf?
Liz, can you please do that on my behalf since I'm not there?
Sure. So, motion to accept nominations for the office of Vice President. Do I have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Kelly DeMayo.
Do I have any other nominations?
I'd like
Cindy?
to nominate Rob Waskis.
Do I have any other nominations? Okay, do I have a motion to close nominations?
So move.
Was that you, Carmen? Was that
Carmen.
Carmen?
Yeah.
No, no.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, roll call vote for Vice President.
Okay, roll call for Kelly DeMayo. Mr. Capagrosso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
No.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
No.
Mr. Waskis?
No.
Ms. Wilson? Yes. Roll call for Mr. Waskis. Mr. Capagrosso?
No.
Mrs. DeSico?
No.
Mrs. DeMayo?
No.
Mr. Costenblatt?
No.
Mrs. Mitchell?
No.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskis?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Okay, resolved that in accordance with NJSA 18A, 15-1, the Washington Township Board of Education in the County of Morris, New Jersey, elects Kelly DeMayo as Vice President of the Board of Education effective January 4th, 2022, for a term prescribed by law. Mrs. DeSico, would you like me to continue, or would you like the meeting to be turned over to Kelly on your behalf?
I'd like to turn it over to Kelly, please.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the annual appointments as well as the annual motions and designations?
So move.
Motion.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to begin now with the regular board meeting agenda, and we will start with the president's comments.
I just want to say welcome and Happy New Year to everybody. We hope that you all enjoyed some time with family and friends during our winter session. I'd like to take a quick second to remind everyone that per Executive Order 253, all school districts must maintain a policy regarding mandatory use of face masks by staff, students, and visitors for the indoor portion of the school district premises. For your convenience, masks are available at the back of the room for anyone in need. We greatly appreciate your cooperation. I'd also like to say thank you for my colleagues for their continued support. I'm honored and humbled to be serving another term as president. Tonight, I want to welcome back Carmine for another 3-year term. In addition to our new members of the board. We're looking forward to a fantastic year ahead and all that is in store for our young learners. We'd like to thank you all for your continued support and involvement in your children's education. It's both important and appreciated. And now on to superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, Washington Township school community. I would like to take a moment to wish everyone in our community a very happy new year. May we all enjoy a very happy and healthy 2022, and at the risk of stating the obvious, I think we are all hopeful 2022 will be the year when we mark the end of this pandemic. That being said, I do recognize positive cases of COVID-19 have been surging in our community these past few weeks. To those in the community whose families have been struggling with positive cases, please know you have all of our best wishes for a speedy and healthy recovery. Given the surge in cases, I do also recognize our decision to return to full in-person instruction yesterday caused heightened levels of anxiety for some in our community. In reopening our schools after the break, our leaders, teachers, and all staff did so with a commitment to continue implementing our safety protocols with explicit reminders for students and staff about the importance of proper mask wearing and social distancing. By doing so, we continue to believe we can operate our schools safely with full in-person instruction, which we believe must also remain our top priority in all that we do to ensure the overall well-being of our students, which includes both their academic and social and emotional well-being. In the coming weeks, we will explore ways we may be able to launch a test-to-stay program for unvaccinated individuals determined to be a close contact from an in-school positive case. We received updated guidance from New Jersey Department of Health specific to test-to-stay programs, and I will provide the community with regular updates in the coming weeks if a viable plan begins to take shape. I do want to highlight one exciting item on the agenda under the Finex section this evening. We have identified a new partner in Aptigee to work with us in redesigning a new website and communication system, which will include a new mobile app. We hope to be prepared to launch these new services before the end of this school year. In closing this evening, I would like to offer my enthusiastic congratulations and sincere welcome to our two new board members, Mrs. Ruggiero and Mr. Waskis. As we all know, we are living through increasingly challenging and stressful times for all elected public service officials. So I applaud both our two new board members alongside all of our board members for their continued dedication to public service and your commitment to our schools and community. Please know your service is very much appreciated. I look forward to maintaining a strong collaboration between our board and administration to ensure our Washington Township schools continue to thrive and achieve even greater levels of success for all of our students. I have a couple other matters of business this evening as part of my report. This is the time of year when we report out a mid-year report related to incidents of HIB in our schools over the last 6 months. Overall, we had a total of 6 incidents that were confirmed, 10 in total, so 4 that were unfounded. Specific to incidents related to violence and vandalism or other types of incidents across our schools over the last 6 months, we had the 6 HIBs that were confirmed. Those were all located at Long Valley Middle School. We had 2 other incidents at Cuccinella. Flocktown Cosman and Old Farmers had 0 incidents. And more specifically and more recently, we currently have no open, or no concluded, I should say, HIB investigations in the district. So I wanted to also report out on that information. And with that, I'm going to invite, we have 3 presentations tonight. I'm going to invite Mrs. Russo to come up and perform and share information about our Start Strong data. I know as families, you received your individual student reports over the break. We're going to receive right now a presentation about our overall district's performance. Mrs. Russo, thank you.
Presentation, maybe. Okay, so this particular presentation will give out results for 3 different tests that we took throughout the course of this year and last year. So we have the dynamic learning map, the Access for L's, and Start Strong. And I'll talk about what each one of those are as we go. The dynamic learning maps is a group of assessments that are given to our significantly cognitive impaired students. So these results are used to help drive instruction for these students. The results, because there are less than 10 students, cannot be shared publicly because it can give away some private information. So how we did on those results cannot be shared, so those are suppressed. Access for Ls. Access for Ls is the test that we give our students who are learning English language. We have currently 39 students who took this test, and they took it in the spring. We have 49 Ls in our district, K through 8. We are in the New Jersey Consortium for WTSCHOOLS, which means that we follow their standards for access for Ls. So we are required by state law to give this test. This test was given in the spring. This test was not permitted to be given remotely, so there were a group of students who did not come in as they did not feel comfortable taking the test in school in the spring. So the results are for 39 of those students. So there's a lot of numbers on this sheet, so I'm going to just basically talk to you about what these numbers mean for us as educators. We look at how our proficiency levels are doing basically in 4 different domains when it comes to English proficiency. So you have listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those 4 domains are target areas for instruction for our ESL teachers who are teaching English proficiency to our students. If you look at how we did overall, we want to obviously be in that last column, right, where they're reaching where they need to be as far as being able to speak, listen, read, and write in English. So we did have 26 students do well in listening. So their listening vocabulary and their listening ability is high. Where we need to put some more focus is looking a little bit more on speaking. I think that has a little bit to do with the pandemic, and just because I think we all know how we feel about speaking when it comes to wearing masks and not being with people, right? So that is something that we are looking at. Reading is okay, we're doing all right there, we could do a little better, and writing is one of our weaker areas where that's in developing as well. What this does for us is gives us a lot of target areas for being able to instruct our students in these areas. So it is good, useful information. The other way we use this information is how they exit from the ESL program. Our L students have to follow an exit criteria process to be released or graduate into our out of the program. So they have to have a 4.5 overall on this test and also find success in the classroom. With these results, plus how we did so far this year, because you can give another test, we've had 10 graduate, so I'm proud of that. Start Strong. Start Strong was the New Jersey way to follow under federal guidelines for assessments that we had to take this past year. So we were able, all of New Jersey took this test in the fall. This was a different test. This isn't like NJSLA or PARCC. It was very, very different, a lot briefer on purpose, because what it did was it tested standards from the year before. So a 6th grader took this test in the fall, and it let us know how they're doing so that we can use the assessment data to help us with instruction moving forward. It was a short test. It was only about an hour in each subject area. We had English, math, and our 6th graders took science. So they had an hour to take this test. Again, it was on the computer, and it did ask questions in areas in English, math, and science for 6th graders, 4 through 8. So overall, and how the results were reported. They were reported by, does the student need strong support? Does the student need some support? Or does the student need less support? We obviously wanted to see less, right? So less is the top area. Less is the area that's in the darker shade of purple. So with our English language arts students across the district, we had 60% of our students who require less support. So that's a good thing. In our middle area, we have 23%, and we have 17% who require some more support. We had 100% participation of this test was 1,115 students who took the test across the district. We also are supposed to report out for subgroups within our district. So the first subgroup that I'm showing right now on this slide is our special ed population in grades 4 through 8. Students with IEPs and also students with 504s. So for the test that asks questions with reading, the students with IEPs, we have 34% who need less support and 38% who need strong support, which we will provide that for them. And in our students with 504s, we have 56% who need less support. Here's our ELS that I was talking about before, who took our access test. Of course, we know because they are lacking English proficiency at this point, 52% need strong support in English. This slide shows an overall, including all subgroups, special education, as well as our ELs and our general population. So 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th, and 8th is here. As you can see, the top, the darker shade of purple, is the students who did well on the test. They need less support. If you're looking at the lighter shade of purple, you're looking at the students who may need more support in the areas of reading and language. Student count is on this side. You can see how many students in grade 4 took the test and where they landed as far as their shades of purple. Math. This is also going to be separated out the same way. In math, we had students in grades 4 through 8 take the test. We have 35% who require less support within the area of mathematics and 28% who require strong support. What does that mean? They require strong support. That means that they are, when we got these results back, the teachers were given these results to look at how they did on those questions, what those standards were, and then how to target their instruction. This is our subgroup of special education for mathematics. We have our students with IEPs, 57% of them need more support. We know that they have their specialized targeted instruction through their IEPs. And our students with 504s, we have 30% who need strong support. Our ELs. Our ELs, 55% of our ELs need strong support. Overall, as a district, grades 4 through 8, also including algebra students, you can notice here the 33, 41, 21, 18, 32, and 33% of our students on the lighter shade of purple need strong support when it comes to math, and the students on the top with the darker shade of purple are doing really well. It was interesting for algebra. Those students had only, I want to say, a week of algebra before they took that test. So they were still required to take the algebra test even though we did it early in September. That I thought was interesting. Yes?
Any thoughts on that being dropped off from 7th to 8th grade or less support needed?
No, I don't. I think, a lot of this, we have to look specifically at the questions, look at specifically which standards were lower. That's something that we do as data teams. We would have to get together, look at that data, figure out why, and then move forward. Yeah. There are 24 questions, so you would easily be able to look at those questions and be able to find out which areas need the strongest targets. Yeah. That's the benefit of a shorter test. Science results for grade 6. We're looking at 33% of our 6th graders who do not need much support in science. A bigger chunk in the middle with 44% and 23% with strong support in science. And we had 243 of our 6th graders take that test. Special ed students with IEPs, 51% with strong support with science, 10% less. And 30% of our 504s, 10% less, 60 right in the middle. And our L students, again, you have this 53 and 53 pretty even, needing support, and 14% of our Ls who are doing well in science. This is the important part for me as the coordinator of intervention, is what do we do with this data? And Rob asked some really good questions about that. What do we do with this data? We look at it. We look at it, but it is a small piece to a very large puzzle. We look at a lot of pieces that go into a student's achievement. This is one piece. We have math assessment, which is another piece of assessment that we use to really look at instruction. We also have our benchmark assessments. We have normal tests that we would take on a normal basis, and we have formative assessments, quizzes, portfolios, work like that project. So there are more to a student than these test scores. I think that was important for me to reiterate tonight, was that this is just a small piece of a larger puzzle where we then think about what we need to do to have our students achieve in our schools. MTSS, which is what we do to support our students, it's a multi-tiered system of support. We look at students who were in that category of strong support. Are they getting the support that they need? So we look at where they fall within those areas of support, and we try to figure out how much of that support they get inside the classroom and outside the classroom with additional support throughout the day. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, okay.
For those parents who find that their child has fallen into the needs strong support category, what can they expect from the district in terms of providing that for their child?
The first thing, hopefully there's communication between the parent and the teacher, just so that they can have that dialogue, because when that came home in the mail, I know, like, even just looking at it, like, okay, 5 out of 8 questions were right, or, you know, what does that mean? The teacher will be able to give more specific answers to that, and then it also, like I said, it is one piece of the puzzle. So if that piece of that puzzle is significant enough, along with the other pieces, then they can expect to be within that tiered support system.
So they can expect a teacher to reach out to them. Somebody from the district would reach out to if their child's within the strong support category?
It depends if the other pieces of the puzzle are also saying the same thing. Because if the math is saying that, and their assessments in class, and this, then it's like, okay, now it's time to really think about what more needs to happen. This was a one-time shot, right? This was 60 minutes of a child's day. It could have been a bad day. It could have been, you know, the questions just weren't hitting home for that child. So we don't look at it as that one piece, more holistically, we'd like to say. But if I was a parent who got that home, I would reach out to be proactive.
You talked about targeting specific needs. Is that ever done by individual student, or is it always by curriculum need?
Individual student for sure. I think that's one of the areas I think I'm most proud of in our district, is that if I reach out to a principal or a teacher or the literacy coach, then we know these students by name. You know, like, we know who they are, we know they're students that might need that additional support, so it is individual, absolutely.
So when you identify needs, that's tailored to a specific student based on, or some individual specific questions?
It could be, and it depends what test. It could be, you know, other assessments as well. It could be a DIBELS, it could be the math assessment, it could be running record.
Okay, actually, I have a question about that. DIBELS.
Yes.
We do those stuff now.
We do them for students within MTSS, so within that tiered system of support, who follow through those categories. So if a student scores below benchmark on an assessment, and that child is then put through the MTSS system, tier 1 is everybody, so it's whoever is filled out. Then that student may then get a specialized assessment, which is the DIBELS. And that's given by a reading specialist.
Is that also true for women who know?
By a reading specialist, yes. Yep. Yeah. It's very diagnostic. So like we would look at all the results to particular assessments and figure out what assessment comes next. Kind of like a doctor would with the test that you would get if they were trying to diagnose you with illness.
Is that done in school?
Yes.
It's not one of the external learning centers?
No, it's here. Or reading specialist.
One more question.
Sure.
Benchmark analysis.
Yes.
Who are you benchmarking? Is that just the
It's
DIBELS and the?
no, benchmarks in every subject, right? Grades 2 through 8. It's really specifically in language arts and math that we really look at, but there are benchmarks in world language, there are other areas.
Like an internal benchmark?
Mrs. Russo, thank you very much. We just want to acknowledge your leadership in this space, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you. And just to reassure the community going forward, as building off of this data and other data that we've been collecting on students, you're going to start to hear more about universal screening protocols and data warehousing so that we are preparing our teachers with all the support they need to provide the individualized interventions over these next couple of months and into even next school year. So appreciate that. Okay, next we're going to move over to our second presentation. I'll invite our auditor to come up. Liz, any introduction other than that? Or? No. Okay, good. All right, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Brian Coe with Nisavacia. I'm the audit manager on your account. I'm going to briefly go over the financials of the district, and I'm going to do it by fund. So I'm going to start with the general fund. Our fund balance in the general fund is up $1 million this year. The main sections that increased this year are going to be the unemployment account. Now, due to GASB 84, unemployment is now included, a reserve for unemployment, in your general fund. It used to be in a separate agency account with payroll, but that doesn't exist anymore. It's now included in general fund. So that's going to be something new you're going to see this year. And then the other thing is your unassigned fund balance increased from 1.3 to $2.5 million. And that's because due to GASB 84, a change in the accounting system, you're required to use 4% of your expenditures. So they set a benchmark that's 4% of your allowable expenditures. It used to be 2%, so it doubled. This is only going to happen for this past June and next June, and then it's going to go back, theoretically, as far as we know right now, to 2%. So that's something to watch out for, and in order to monitor your fund balance, Liz and I communicate on that and where we want the fund balance to be at that time. Let me know if you have any questions on that. In special revenue fund, the district utilized $794,000 in federal grants, which is great. You're up about $300,000 from the year before, or about $250,000. Most of that is from COVID grants. They had a couple of coronavirus relief fund and the ESSER grants. In capital projects fund, the referendum roof replacement and HVAC upgrades project began during 2020 using the bond anticipation notes, which have subsequently been paid off in July of 2022 with your capital reserve funds.
21, Brian.
Yes, 21, sorry. You're in the 2022 school year. That's where I was getting that from. The district also received over $103,000 from SDA grants that were booked as receivable previously. This was for the Flocktown HVAC project, so that project is now completely closed out. In debt service fund, as of June 30th, the district had $3.8 million in serial bonds. There are 3 payments left on these. They're from 2013, they're refunding bonds, and the last payment is due July of 2023. The district legal debt limit is $87 million. However, you're using less than 10% of this right now. We don't recommend you use all 87 of it, but you do have that option there. The district continues to utilize capital leases for equipment and vehicle purchases with very favorable interest rates, especially through this past fiscal year. And the district paid off 1 vehicle lease and the phone system lease during the year. In the food service enterprise fund, expenditures did exceed revenues by almost $31,000. This is similar to previous years. However, eliminating the deficit in the food service fund is a suggestion in our auditor's report. And in the transportation service fund, you have a very healthy fund balance in there. The revenues exceeded expenditures by $69,000, which is consistent with previous years. We have no audit recommendations this year. This is due to the wonderful job that Liz and her staff do. We really do appreciate you being attentive to us, especially during COVID, and answering our questions and allowing us to get through the audit in a speedy manner. And we'd also like to thank the board for your continued faith in us, your auditors, and if you have any questions, please let us know. We are here all year round. It's not just during the audit. If you ever have questions, you can contact us. Does anybody have any questions on the audit? Okay, if you want, you all have a digital copy, but you can read through the whole thing. If you want, that'd be great, because I did write it, and no one ever reads it, so.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Good evening.
No, not until public comment. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So thank you for your presentation, and I would like to take a moment to applaud Liz and our entire business office to have an audit done that's so clean like this. Yeah, we very much appreciate it. Great work, especially during pandemic conditions. So thank you for your presentation, and kudos to our business office. With that, we're going to go to our third and final presentation. I'll invite Mr. Fogarty to take us through our ethics training. Thank you.
Well, that was abundantly successful.
John, can you help? I don't know what happened there.
Here we go.
There it is.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and excuse my back. I'm Stephen Fogarty. I'm the attorney for the school district. Welcome to our new board members. I'm here tonight to give you your annual ethics training and to talk to you about the role of the board, the role of the superintendent, and how our respective roles intersect with one another. I'm going to be taking you through some nuts and bolts in terms of the Code of Ethics for school board members. I'm also going to be talking to you about a number of decisions that have been decided by the School Ethics Commission. So I guess that's really a good place for me to start. The School Ethics Commission is the body that has jurisdiction with regard to the conduct of board members, and the School Ethics Commission is a commission that is staffed by appointees of the governor. The School Ethics Commission hears complaints. If a complaint is filed by an individual against a board member, keep in mind that a complaint can be filed against a board member by anyone, save the board itself. So if the board is displeased with the conduct of one of its own members, the Washington Township Board of Education cannot, as a body, file a complaint against one of its members. That must be done by an individual against a board member. School Ethics Commission also issues what are called advisory opinions. Advisory opinions means exactly that. So if a member of the board is concerned about some private action that he or she may be taking, some business that he or she is engaged in, if they are concerned about whether or not they can vote on something because of a personal, familial, or financial interest, they can ask the School Ethics Commission to issue what is called an advisory opinion. And they are actually quite good at doing that. As long as you get the opinion into them by the 10th day of the month, they generally will get you the advice by the following month, which will then guide you with regard to whatever decisions you are required to make. So let me jump right into this in terms of the jurisdiction. I want to talk a little bit about the role of the board. The board's roles are defined by statute. When you take your oath of office as a board member, you are agreeing to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. And our responsibilities as board members, as administrators, what we do in this school district is governed by Title 18A, which are the education statutes. And the education statutes give the board general mandatory powers and duties, tells the board what you are entitled to do. What I want to emphasize here is that your responsibilities, your duties and your responsibilities are express duties. There are no implied duties. So unless you are specifically authorized to do a particular thing, you cannot do it by implication. There must be a statute or a regulation that actually authorizes you to take the particular action that you're contemplating. And so under Title 18A, you enforce the rules of the New Jersey State Board of Education. You make, amend, and repeal rules for government and management of the schools. You do that through your district policies and your regulations. And you perform all acts and do all things consistent with law, rules of the state board, in order to carry out the lawful and proper conduct, equipment, and maintenance of your school district. So if you're going to spend money, then you are going to have to comply with Title 18A in terms of what that money can actually be spent for. You just got a report from your auditor in terms of the district's healthy financial condition. You know that you have certain accounts, current expense, capital reserve, maintenance. The law governs what you can do with all of those monies and restricts what you can do within each of those accounts. So the role of the board, what you do is you approve the curriculum that meets the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. You adopt a budget that provides for a thorough and efficient education and funds the curriculum that you approve. You hire the necessary certified personnel to educate the district students, and you develop policies for the management of the school district. None of these actions that are taken by the board, however, are taken without the recommendation of the superintendent of schools. So the board could not unilaterally adopt a curriculum. The board could not unilaterally adopt a budget. The board could not unilaterally appoint personnel to the school district, with one exception, and that exception is with regard to the non-renewal of staff. So if an employee is recommended by the superintendent for non-renewal, and that employee files an appeal to the board has the ability in that one and only instance to trump the recommendation of the superintendent of schools. The idea being that there was a point in time when that employee was recommended by the superintendent of schools, so the board now has the ability to listen to that employee, what is called an informal appearance before the board, and decide whether they are going to accept or reverse the decision of the superintendent. What else do you do as a board? Other than make policies and approve regulations, you are required ultimately to make decisions with regard to harassment, intimidation, and bullying. You are the final arbiters of those decisions. You know that the superintendent comes to you twice a month. He comes to you once a month, 2 successive meetings, and he presents to you the findings of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, whether they're credited or not credited. You ultimately make those decisions if a parent or an employee appeals, keeping in mind that the HIB laws protect kids against other kids and kids against employees, volunteers, and contractors in our school district. And if there's an appeal, you are the final arbiters of those decisions. Long-term suspensions for students, any student that is suspended for more than 10 days, that cannot happen without the board making that decision. Residency appeals. Only the board can decide to disenroll a student based on a determination that he or she is not living here. Grievances under the collective negotiations agreement with the WTEA. If a grievance is filed on behalf of the union, that ultimately terminates at the board level. The board makes the final decision. Terminations for cause. Superintendent does not have the ability to terminate anyone. Superintendent has the ability to recommend a termination. Only the board can terminate an employee for cause. And increment withholdings as a form of disciplinary action if the superintendent decides that an employee's salary increase for the following year should be withheld. That must be approved by majority vote of the full board. And non-renewals, I've already addressed that. If an employee is non-renewed by the superintendent, that's a final decision. Unless it's appealed, the board takes no action on a non-renewal. But if there is an appeal, as I indicated to you in my opening remarks, the board is the final decision maker with regard to a non-renewal appeal. Board functions only when it is in session, and a quorum of the board is required to convene a meeting and to take action. Why is that important? Not because of that statement, which I think is pretty obvious to us. It's important because this is controlled by the Open Public Meetings Act. And what it means is that you can only function when you are in session. You cannot do that telephonically. You cannot do that in terms of real-time communications through email. You can't do that in terms of real-time chat with regard to board issues. And if you do, you run the risk that you're violating the Open Public Meetings Act because your actions can only be taken at a public meeting where there is a quorum of the board. So you want to be mindful that if you're communicating with one another, you indicate on that communication, do not reply. You also do not want to reply to all. You do not want to invite a response from a group of board members on a particular issue, because then you run the risk that that would be considered a quorum outside of a public meeting, which would be a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. So we have to meet at least once every 2 months. We have the ability, if a quorum is not present, to adjourn the meeting and to reconvene. And as I said, meetings must comply with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. And a complaint that we have violated the Open Public Meetings Act is actually a complaint which would be filed with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. Commissioner of Education doesn't have jurisdiction over that. School Ethics Commission doesn't have jurisdiction over that. That is actually a matter for the prosecutor to resolve one way or the other. So the board and the administration, and how do we intersect? What are your responsibilities under the Code of Ethics? The board's direct responsibilities, as I've said to you, are to make policy, to develop plans, evaluate the outcomes, not to manage the day-to-day operations of the school district. And so you can see that members of the board are responsible not to administer the schools. Your responsibility is to see that they are well run. And that is to hold the superintendent accountable, to hold your business administrator accountable, and to ensure that they hold their administrators accountable, and to ensure that their administrators hold their teachers and their paraprofessionals and their administrative assistants accountable. And that's the way that it all kind of ticks up in terms of the board's responsibility. No board member has the ability to exercise any administrative responsibility with respect to the operation of the school. You cannot do this even if it's well-meaning, even if it is really kind of incidental. You know, the example that is often given is you go into one of the schools and you are not happy with the cleanliness of that school. You're not happy with the cleanliness of that restroom. You would not have the ability to direct a custodian or a maintenance employee to take any action. You would need to direct that to the superintendent or to the principal of that building. Again, you cannot get involved in the day-to-day or the management of the schools. And you do not have direct access to school district personnel. You have to speak to the superintendent with regard to any issues that you want to address with any of the administrators or those who may be subordinate to the superintendent. When you visit a school, you have to comply with the school district's visitors policy. And while it's often said that you are always a board member when you walk into a school, notice is obviously taken because everyone knows that in addition to being a parent or a family member, that you are also a board member. You need to comply with the visitors policy, and your rights and privileges at that point are no greater than any other visitor into the school district. You delegate certain responsibilities to your administrative officials. Superintendent, you delegate the responsibility to administer this school district, to keep the board informed of what's happening here, to make sure that the operations that the operational recommendations are made to the board. You also delegate certain responsibilities to your business administrator to oversee the business and maintenance of the school district, to prepare the budget, establish and maintain the fiscal plans, serve as a general accountant and the official purchasing agent. And so those responsibilities are delegated to her. And the superintendent oversees both the educational and the fiscal operations of the school district. He is responsible for evaluating your business administrator and to reporting back to the board as to whether she is fulfilling her responsibilities for the fiscal plan of the school district. Your relationship, as contemplated by the Code of Ethics for school board members with the administration, whether it's a superintendent, the business administrator, or any other administrator, it's intended to be cooperative, not adversarial. It's often said that you should share your concerns with the administration in advance of these meetings. If you have questions when that agenda goes out, those questions should go to the superintendent and to the business administrator before we get here, in the hopes that you can ultimately resolve those issues before we get to a board meeting. It assures an effective public response for you, and also ensures that you come to these board meetings fully prepared to address the agenda items that are presented to you. As required by the Code of Ethics and your board policy, and I want to emphasize here that you have board policies that in many ways reflect the Code of Ethics and in many ways go beyond the Code of Ethics. And so you have a board policy here that says that a board member confronted with a complaint should withhold comment and instead refer that issue to the superintendent. You may not, no matter how compelling, you may not act at a public meeting on a complaint. Members of the audience, regardless of how compelling their request may be, regardless how compelling that complaint may be, you don't have the ability as the board under your policy or under the Code of Ethics to act on it until the superintendent's had an opportunity to respond to it. And if you're not satisfied with the superintendent's response, then you as a board have the ability to take it up and to offer an appropriate resolution. So the Code of Ethics specifically requires the board members to support all district staff, including the administration. One of the code provisions says that you will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. A violation of that command would occur if there was evidence that board members took deliberate action, which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the performance of their duties. How would that happen, you would ask? How would that happen? Let's say, for example, that you wanted to know how the superintendent was doing in preparation for his evaluation. And instead of performing that evaluation based on your own assessment of how he's doing, you decided to go out and ask your principals how he's doing. That would be a violation of this provision. It doesn't mean that you can't disagree with the recommendations of the superintendent. Board is not intended to be a rubber stamp. You are intended to have an interactive process with regard to all of those recommendations. But to make sure that you stay within your policymaking and your evaluative role of the superintendent, not to reach out and go beyond your responsibility as identified in the Code of Ethics. Criticizing the superintendent could lead to a violation of this Code of Ethics. So if you want to criticize the superintendent for something, there's an opportunity for you to do that. It is called the annual evaluation. That is where you evaluate the superintendent's performance, and you have an opportunity there to address any issues that you may have. You have another policy, 1210, that says that it's the primary duty of the board to establish policies, primary duty of the superintendent to implement and administer the policies, and the superintendent is the primary professional advisor to the board. Policies should not be adopted or revised without consulting the superintendent. Superintendent is responsible for the development, supervision, and operation of the school program and facilities, and will be given latitude to implement and administer those policies in accordance with the standards that you have set in the policy. Those are your policies. That is what you have ordained. That is what you have said that goes beyond the Code of Ethics for school board members. Individual board members. The board is a unit, not a collection of individuals. Very important. This is an area where board members get themselves into difficulty far too often because they do not understand that as individuals, we do not have any rights beyond that which the board has authorized us to pursue. So we are expected to share our opinions when we come here. We're expected to have a very robust exchange and dialogue. But the board elects, once the board elects a single course of action by a majority vote, we are expected as board members to respect that. In open meetings, to preserve the decorum and to ensure the board expresses a single, consistent opinion, only the president speaks for the board on the board's behalf, unless the president requests another member's contribution. And that is your board policy. That is what you have decided in terms of what you have decided in terms of the governance of your board meetings. Professional experience and professional expertise. All of us come to this process with many talents, a great deal of experience, a good deal of expertise, whether we are doctors or lawyers or architects or teachers or administrators. Here are your board members. And so you need to make sure that you do not step outside of your policymaking role, no matter how well-meaning that may be. You can express your opinions. Ultimately, it is the recommendation of the superintendent and the ultimate decision of the board that must guide our decisions. So the powers of the board and the authority of a board member are not coextensive. You have a policy that says a board member does not possess individually the authority and powers that reside in the board. No board member, by virtue of his or her office, shall exercise any administrative responsibility with regard to the operation of the school district. Board members on their own have no supervisory authority. So even assuming it's well-meaning, let's take, for example, that you're in finance and that you are very well connected with corporate executives in Morris County, and you decide that you're going to take it upon yourself to reach out to them and to ask them to contribute to a scholarship fund or to an educational foundation in Washington Township. Unless the board has given you the authority to do that, even though that serves a laudatory purpose, raising money for the school district, that would be a violation of the School Ethics Act and a violation of this provision of the board's policy. Members of the board represent the district and the interests of Washington Township school children and residents and must comport themselves professionally at all times. What does that mean? That means that we need to be mindful of social media, how we address ourselves, when we are perhaps sending a letter to the editor, when we are making a public statement. And here I want to remind you that if you are on social media, if you are sending a letter to the editor, if you are making a public statement before another body, you have an obligation to self-identify. What does that mean? It's not enough for you simply to make that statement or post those comments and not say that they are, and not make an affirmative statement that these are made on behalf of the board or that you are making them as a member of the Washington Township Board of Education. When I say that you have an obligation to self-identify, what I mean is you have to actually say that I'm Stephen Fogarty, I'm a member of the Washington Township Board of Education, and what I'm about to say, what I'm about to post, what I'm about to transmit has not been authorized by the Washington Township Board of Education, and my statements are being made as a private individual. The absence of that would be a violation of the Code of Ethics. You have an obligation to preserve the confidentiality of information learned as members of the board. This is also an area that has gotten board members into difficulty, and it has gotten them into difficulty for two reasons. First, it would be a violation of the Code of Ethics, but more importantly and of greater concern to me, in my experience in representing school districts when lawsuits have been filed, is that if we disclose confidential information about students or we disclose confidential information about staff members, that is an invasion of their privacy. It is potentially a violation of federal law and state law and could very well result in a lawsuit against the board and the individual board member. The other concern I have is that if a board member does that, outside of a board meeting, we have an executive session. We discuss a problem with a teacher. You can see the example. A member learns during closed session that the administration has suspended a 7th grade math teacher pending the results of a psychiatric evaluation. That information could not be disclosed to anyone, but in this case, it was disclosed to the board member's child, who was a child in that teacher's class, and then that information was republished over and over again. That would be a violation of that teacher's rights. It would be an invasion of privacy, and even greater concern is that that lawsuit might very well mean that if the board member was named individually, he or she would not be covered by our general liability policy, that he or she would have acted outside of his or her elected responsibilities and would run the risk that they would not be indemnified if they were named individually in that lawsuit. And even something as simple as if we were deliberating over whether to reorganize our schools and in terms of the grade configurations. And let's say that you have a friend who's considering moving into Washington Township. They want to know which school they should buy their house in. Disclosing that information, as innocent as that might be, would be a violation of the Code of Ethics. So board members cannot perform the tasks that are the responsibility of the superintendent. Obviously, the superintendent is certificated. The school administrator endorses the superintendent to do all of those things. Obviously, board members have an obligation to oversee the execution of those responsibilities, but not to perform them themselves. So one of the main limits on the role of board members is the Code of Ethics. I've kind of illustrated all of that with regard to your board policies. So I'm going to go through the rest of this pretty quickly. These are the essentials in terms of confining your action to policy making, not administering the schools, recognize that authority rests with the board, all reflected in your policies, refuse to surrender your independent judgment to special interests, ensure that confidentiality is preserved, and not to disclose any confidential information out of an executive session, appoint the best qualified personnel recommended by the superintendent. Doesn't mean that you have to accept the recommendation. You have the ability to tell the superintendent to go back to the well and bring another candidate. You simply do not have the ability to leapfrog over him and make your own recommendation with regard to someone that you would like to see employed in this school district. Support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties, and refer all complaints, whether they come to you at a board meeting, on the soccer field, at the market, regardless of where somebody comes up to you and says, you're a member of the Washington Township Board of Education, answer yes. I want to tell you about a problem that I have. You listen to that problem, you tell that individual to speak to the superintendent, or you refer that complaint to the superintendent. That's your responsibility. I'm not suggesting that you can unring the bell, but you need to refer that complaint to the superintendent for an appropriate disposition. So the Code of Ethics really does set a limited role for us as board members. Our role is advisory, it's evaluative, setting the parameters of what the administrators do, and then evaluating the performance of the superintendent and meeting those parameters. And I'm going to go past this pretty quickly. What types of administrative action violate the Code of Ethics? Taking action that was unrelated to a board member's duty to develop policies and regulations, giving a direct order to school personnel, or becoming directly involved in activities or functions that are the responsibility of school personnel. Talk to you in a moment how that implicates your role as volunteers in the school district. Taking deliberate action which results in undermining or compromising school personnel, or attempting to resolve a complaint or conduct an investigation that has not been referred to the superintendent. The limits imposed by the Code of Ethics are clearly seen in the limited involvement board members have in personnel decisions. The board member's role in hiring is to vote to appoint the best qualified personnel. You cannot withhold your approval for the hiring of a candidate for arbitrary or capricious reasons. What does that mean? Let's say that you as a board member are philosophically opposed to tenure. You could not, based on that philosophy, however strongly you might hold that philosophy, you could not withhold your vote because you did not want the individual to get tenure because you were opposed to tenure. As a best practice, you should limit your involvement in hiring to the hiring of the superintendent of schools, and then only considering the superintendent's recommendations for all other positions. And the reason I say as a best practice is that you are not, as board members, legally prohibited from being involved in the interview process, arguably of principals and administrators and supervisors, certainly not teachers. But you are not legally prohibited from being involved in that hiring practice. But the School Ethics Commission has offered its opinion that generally the best practice is for you not to be involved in that process. But again, I want to emphasize that that is not a Code of Ethics provision. That is not a statutory provision. That is the School Ethics Commission opining as to what your role should be. So a board member, this is one of those advisory opinions that I talked to you about. A board member requested an opinion regarding authority to conduct exit interviews of staff members to determine the causes of staff turnover. So this is a situation where people were leaving the district. The board was concerned. You know, what's causing this? What's causing this mass exit out of our school district? They wanted to interview the employees that had resigned from the school district. School Ethics Commission advised against board members engaging in exit interviews, explaining that it would violate several provisions of the Code of Ethics, that the board members would be taking action outside of their policy making, planning, and appraisal, and they would be engaging in an administrative function left to school personnel. So you can see that this is well-meaning, probably served a laudatory purpose. Board members want to get to the bottom of it. They want to maintain, they wanted to maintain continuity with regard to qualified staff, but regardless, School Ethics Commission said we as board members cannot be involved in that practice. Board member requested an opinion regarding the appropriate level of involvement for board members in the interview process, and the School Ethics Commission said that while they don't support it, what they have suggested as a best practice, if you're going to be involved, is that it be no more than 2 board members, that the superintendent acknowledge that you are going to be involved in that process, and that you are not interactively involved in the interview process. As far as I'm concerned, with those kinds of limitations, I say why bother? You know, if board members are not going to be able to be involved in the process, I think that to go to the interview process and simply as spectators or to conduct the observation of the interview process, I'm not sure that it serves a very valuable experience. I would much rather that the recommendation from the superintendent be someone that you interview as a board rather than being involved in that process. These are some cases, not advisory opinions, but some cases in which the School Ethics Commission was presented with complaints and had to make a decision about whether a board member had violated the Code of Ethics, and if the board member did, what the appropriate consequence should be. So board members allege that the board president in this case violated the code by extensive involvement in the interview process for a principal. The board president created extensive and detailed staffing packets to be used in the hiring process for administrative positions, including rating forms, interview forms, rating sheets, a recruiting guide, an interview guide, selection criteria, and a list of interview questions, among other documents. I think you know where this is going. This is obviously going south pretty quickly because this board president was too involved in this process, too involved, inextricably involved in the interview process. So you have the right to see resumes. You have the right to see the individuals who weren't recommended by the superintendent. You as board members can make an appointment during regular business hours, go into the superintendent's office, sit down and review the candidates who actually applied for positions and perhaps didn't make the final round, but you do not have the ability to become this involved in the selection process. Board member accompanied by another board member went to the board office without prior notice to the administration to review the resumes of candidates for an open position. Now, I've just told you that you have the ability to make an appointment and to go in and to review resumes. But in this case, the board member decided to take it upon herself to go into the board office. She wanted to see the resumes. The door was locked. She went to the custodial staff. She got a key. She had them open the door. She went into the files, pulled the resumes, and she was found to have violated the School Ethics Act for all of those reasons that I've already outlined for you this evening. Because the respondent entered the board office in her capacity as a board member, she had to limit her action to policy making, planning, and appraisal. They held that she violated the Code of Ethics because she went beyond the mere appraisal of resumes. She did not administer the schools. They didn't find that that was a violation, but ultimately she was publicly censured. And that leads me to what happens if there is a violation of the Code of Ethics. So in the worst case, you could be removed from the board. But let's talk about what is more likely to happen. What is more likely to happen is that there can be a private reprimand. If the School Ethics Commission believes that your conduct is more serious, there is a public reprimand. And that public reprimand must be reviewed by the board at a board meeting and must become part of a formal resolution. The School Ethics Commission could also suspend you from the board for a period of times, short of removal, but impose a period of suspension from the board. This complaint alleged that the board president violated the Code of Ethics by personally issuing a rice notice to the business administrator without prior notification to the board or the recommendation of the superintendent. So here's what happened in this case. Board president was upset with the business administrator, wasn't satisfied that she was responding to her in the way that she felt that she should be responding. She felt that it was a matter that needed to be taken up by the entire board. And so the board president issued a rice notice. And you know that a rice notice is issued so that we can have a closed executive session to talk about that employee. So the question is, who has the authority to issue a rice notice to an employee of this school district? Only the superintendent has the authority to issue a rice notice to an employee of this school district or a majority of the full board. An individual board member does not have that authority. The board president does have the authority to issue a rice notice to the superintendent. But save that one exception, then only the rice notice can only be issued by the superintendent. And why? Because the superintendent is responsible for all personnel recommendations. So if the superintendent hasn't issued that rice notice, the board must take it up as an entire board and then only by a majority of the board. In this case, 2 board members alleged that the director of special services was double dipping by working in another school district. And so they decided that they were going to conduct surveillance and basically an investigation into that. And you know that very quickly went south too. If you believe that some administrator in the district is doing something untoward, is doing something that in this case would be criminal fraud, then you need to refer that complaint to the superintendent. He'll refer it to me. Perhaps the prosecutor's office becomes involved, but suffice it to say that you as board members could not, as individuals, take up that investigation. This case, 2 complaints allege that board members violated the statute. 4 members of a 9-member board actively participated in the interview process of candidates for principal positions in the middle and high schools. And so they were authorized to do that. They were authorized to participate in the interview process for the candidates for principal, and regardless of the fact that the School Ethics Commission doesn't like that practice, they were found not to have violated the Code of Ethics. Volunteering in the schools. So this is a bright line. Basically, there are a number of advisory opinions, but the bright line is this. If you are going to be a volunteer in the school district, you cannot volunteer in a capacity that has you supervising or directing staff members or students. So you can be a class parent. You can go on a school trip. You can be involved in extracurricular activities. You could be involved in creating the sets for play. You could not be involved in selecting the students who would get those roles in the play. So the bright line is that your volunteerism, your involvement as volunteers should be encouraged, strongly encouraged. But the bright line is that you cannot give direct orders to school personnel or to students while engaging in those responsibilities. And then the question is, what about outside organizations? So the Educational Foundation, PTOs, PTAs, booster clubs. And so those are separate autonomous bodies. They are not under the auspices of the Board of Education. There are no restrictions in terms of your involvement in those activities. However, if something comes before the board from the Ed Foundation, they want to use your facilities, from the Booster Club, they want to use your facilities, or they want to run a turkey tray or fundraising. If that comes before the board and you are a member of that board, a trustee, you're involved in those outside organizations, then you would abstain from those matters coming before the board, but you would not be disenfranchised as volunteers. So the common pitfalls to avoid, and this is really to sum up: taking unilateral action, neglecting the stakeholders, asserting authority over staff members, referring friends for employment, trying to use your position to gain unwarranted advantages, participating directly in district administration. Those are all the common pitfalls to avoid. And you are finished with me now for this year, but I'll answer any of your questions. Yes. Absolutely. You can provide a notice of a vacancy to someone that you have a relationship with, a friend. You can also hand over a resume to the superintendent on behalf of someone, but just you want to make sure that in handing it over, there's no discussion about whether that person is qualified or asking for any special consideration. But certainly, in response to your question, entirely permissible. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on and continue down through our regular meeting agenda. Correspondence, we received emails from A. Field, J. Oldmixon, A. Nesfetter, R. Waskis, C. Ruggiero, W. Curioni, J. Coladarsi, and S. Buzenkamp. Committee reports, we actually do not have any committee reports to share at this time. So at this time, I'm going to make a motion to open the meeting for public comments on agenda items only. Can I get a second? All in favor?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are going to open up for public comment on agenda items only. Please remember to state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes. Any comments on agenda items? Okay, we're going to continue on. Can I get a motion? I'm sorry, go ahead. Sure.
David Cook, 5 Melissa Trail. It was mentioned in the audit that there was, I believe, it was $2.5 million of unallocated funds. Is that fund required by law? Does that money just sit there, or can it be used toward a capital reserve project like HVAC in this school, for example, or does it just sit there?
So thank you for your comments. I just want to reiterate again, this isn't a Q&A period, but if those are all your questions, and if there are no other public comments, we'd invite you to sit down, and then we'll have a response for you. Do you have any other comments to share? Or those your, okay, thank you. And if there are no other public comments, we'll close public. If there's another, then.
Yeah, and I can speak from here because I know I'm last information that you might not want me up at the front. So the gentleman that was speaking on the audit, Mr. Brian Kerr, he talked about a COVID relief fund. If you could please maybe tell us what that is. And also he mentioned an abbreviation, I think it was ESER funds. What does that stand for? What does that mean? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if there are no other public comments at this time, okay, we'll close public comment. And Ms. George, can I turn it over to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the district is permitted, Mr. Coe mentioned that we do maintain a unallocated surplus. So the district is permitted to maintain 2% in surplus, and there was a recently passed law that permitted us to increase that to 4% for the 2 years, last year and this year coming up. We also maintain, have a separate capital reserve fund, which would be used for capital projects. To answer your question specifically about whether that can be used for capital projects, it can be, should the board decide either at budget time or in June to allocate money into capital reserve to then use that for a long-term funding. Just as a point of reference, at one point, the district was permitted by law to maintain 6.5% in reserves, and that was brought down several years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, to a maximum of 2%, which in a district of our size, while it may seem like a lot of money when we're talking about buildings or an out-of-district special education placement or a boiler that perhaps needs repair, you know, it is important to maintain some level of reserves for unanticipated expenditures. As to the question regarding COVID relief funds, yes, the district did receive money from the federal government that flowed through the state of New Jersey to help with the unanticipated costs of COVID, things such as ventilation enhancements, the purchase of air filters for classrooms, other health and safety supplies. Chromebooks are also another item that we use the money for in order to maintain a one-on-one initiative for the students.
Thank you. And I'm sorry.
So I kind of lumped them together. ESSER
Okay.
stands for, oh boy, they've thrown all kinds of acronyms at us this year. Educational.
There you go.
Do you remember?
The rest of them is support relief, but it's federal money that's been given to the school district as a result of the COVID pandemic.
Yes. But as to the ESSER, I would have to actually look it up to remember exactly what the acronym stands for.
I was just going to say, I believe it's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
There you go, Kelly. That's exactly what it is. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on from public comments on agenda item. At this time, can I get a motion to approve the December 14th, 2021 regular meeting minutes?
Motion.
Thank you.
Motion.
Second?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, it is hereby moved upon recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following. Education,
Education, I'd like to move items 1 through 4 on the agenda.
comments?
You need a second.
Second first. Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
Comments?
Yeah, a couple comments, really questions. The ELL three-year plan, is this a revision of a pre-existing plan?
Updated and revision, yes. Gets submitted to the state on a 3-year cycle.
Okay, so it references an existing parent advisory committee on bilingual education that was approved by the board. When was that done? How often is that done? Is that an annual thing?
Specific to the 3-year plan?
I'm sorry, can Rob talk into the microphone, because I can't hear a thing?
There's a button on the top, Rob, right at the top.
All right, that sounds better. Sorry about that, didn't realize it wasn't on. There is a reference in that 3-year plan about a board-approved parent advisory committee on bilingual education. I was wondering how often we approve that PAC, the parent advisory committee.
The plan, since the plan is on a 3-year cycle, it likely is similar in terms of the advisory that is approved on that similar cycle.
Okay. And there were a couple of, it looked like stakeholders that weren't included on that plan, including a community rep and teacher and child study team. Is there any plan to change that?
We can certainly take that under advisement, sure.
Okay. There was another question I had. Do members of the PAC contribute to the LIEP type selection? And we checked off no. So my question is, should they be contributing to that? Is there a reason they're not? Would it be beneficial to have them contribute?
I missed the first part. Members of the what?
So members of this parent advisory committee, it's, right now we're saying they don't contribute to the LIEP type selection. Should they be?
I wouldn't advise that they should, no.
Okay.
Those individual level plans would be focused more on the educational experience of each student.
Okay. All right. Another question, teachers certified in bilingual or as bilingual bicultural. Right now, we don't have any. Is there any plan to address that, to change that? Are we actively searching for anybody?
Nothing concrete in terms of planning. It's certainly something that could be embedded in goals going forward.
Okay. Similar question. Is staff members trained in sheltered English instruction? Right now, we're less than 10%. Is that sufficient? Should we be increasing that?
Well, it's a point for discussion. Given the overall size of the population, that could be sufficient. The type of training you're referring to, though, is excellent training and something we certainly want to explore expanding for all of our educators.
All right, because the report says that the ELL numbers are increasing somewhat year over year, and as Debbie pointed out earlier, they're not meeting the math achievement or progress indicators, so is there a desire to, I guess, do something about that? Is that a way to do something about that?
No, it's certainly something we're
Can I just
taking-
make a comment? I'm sorry, Peter, but like this is for comment, not question and answers. Question and answers should be dealt on a committee level, unless I'm missing something here.
No, I appreciate it, Madam President. Given the fact that we have 2 new board members with us and we didn't have the opportunity to participate in a committee this month, I'm okay with some additional questions. And once we get into the committee process, I think we'll do that, if that's okay with you, Matt?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So specific to that population, yes, it's something that we want to spend more attention on in the coming, especially in the coming years.
Okay, similar question, the funding. I guess we got some funding, and it was all allocated for general supplies. So would it be, I guess, appropriate or beneficial to dedicate that to other instructional programs instead of general supplies? Is there just not enough?
Instead of general what? I didn't understand.
General supplies, so there were a bunch of different categories that show where we spend the funding on this, and it was general supplies. So is that the best use of those dollars, or should we be looking at other instructional programs as a better use of that funding?
Without greater context on the other aspects of that budget, it'd be hard for me to describe. I can tell you recent activities in this space has been quite effective, where we have made some significant parent outreach to this community and have received positive feedback about the idea of doing more community-based events to have this community of students and these families be more engaged in our schools. So we do see some positive progress over the last couple of months there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Do you need to report out on the anti-bullying?
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. George. And I put that in my superintendent's report, but I'll restate it now. We do not have any current finalized HIB investigations at this time.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Capagrasso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskus?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay, finance. Finance would like to move item number 5 on the agenda. Motion to accept with gratitude the following contribution: $2,586.48 from LifeTouch National School Studios to be used at the Long Valley Middle School for educational programs. Can I get a second?
Second.
Comments? Okay, roll call?
Mr. Capagrasso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskus?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay, finance would like to move items number 6 through 11 on the agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Comments?
2 comments. First one, the budget transfer, 4K, what was that for?
I have to look it up. I think it was for technology were the individual items. I went into a sleep mode. Hold on.
Can't lift my fingers.
Yes, so that was based on GAAP accounting. We are required to account for certain items in different accounts depending on the dollar amount of the item. So because the item was more than $2,000 individually, it had to be classified as equipment as opposed to supply. So it's staying within the technology department, but it's the purchase of a Ben keyboard that is being piloted as, to increase our technology in the district.
Okay, thank you. Second comment, the 9,600 or so for Aptigee, what are the deliverables we're getting for that 9,600? It just says web services?
Is this item number 10?
Yes.
Yes.
Aptigee, yes. The deliverables with the Aptigee contract focus on the design and launch of a mobile app and new website in conjunction with the new communication system for how we blast text, emails, phone messages. I know many people received messages tonight about our delayed opening tomorrow due to the weather forecast. It's a new system that is more unified, and they will walk us through the entire design process of a new website that will allow us to just basically start from scratch. Rather than try to tweak our current site, it will be a brand new launch. And the timeline is to be able to launch the new site before the end of this school year, ideally. I'd love to also see it happen in May, just so we have some time. And then by the summer, we'd be using the new communication system.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Mr. Capagrasso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskus?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Personnel?
Personnel would like to move number 12, motion to accept with regret the following resignations. Michael Forense, Special Education Aide, Long Valley Middle School, effective January 8th, 2022.
and Helen Garrett Hall, special education aide, Flocktown Cosman School, effective December 24th, 2021.
Can I get a second? Comments? Roll call?
Mr. Capagrosso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskis?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay, personnel would like to move items 13 through 19.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Comments? Roll call?
Mr. Capagrosso?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSico?
Yes.
Mrs. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Costenblatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Muserino?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes.
Mr. Waskis?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay, on to unfinished business. Anybody have any unfinished business? Okay, new business? Okay, then at this point, I would like to make a motion to open the meeting for public comment. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. At this point, we're going to open up the meeting for public comments. I would like to remind you that you will have 3 minutes, and we're going to ask again that you please state your name and address.
Kel Rivera, 176 Schoolies Mountain Road. Good evening. First, I'd like to congratulate the board's newest members. I'd like to extend that congratulations to Mr. Capagrosso. Thank you for your continued service to our community via this board. Secondly, I want to extend my best wishes to the board as a whole. Over the past 2 years, I've come to understand the truly thankless job that our local board and our educational professionals have. Emphasis on the board because I know you all volunteer your time and have stood in my place at some point in time having either children, relatives, or grandchildren in our educational system. I didn't grow up in town, but my wife was here with us did, and she often talks about how growing up, she knew kids whose families would move to Long Valley just because our schools were that good. Unfortunately, that's not the standard for every municipality in New Jersey. For example, I went to school in an Abbott district, and for the benefit of our community who's here and for those watching, an Abbott district is an urban school district in New Jersey where the education that they provide was deemed inadequate and unconstitutional. And what happens is that usually the state comes in and provides special services or funds in order to bring the level of those districts up. And usually the districts in the Abbott districts get their vast majority of their funding through the state. So in my case, even though the school system I went to had a budget within the hundreds of millions, it was common for us to lack the basics like textbooks, adequate gym equipment for physical education, quality lunch food, and it breaks my heart, but sometimes even compassion from those who were supposed to be responsible for our education. And I know I'm being a little bit long-winded, but my point in all this is that I've been on the other side of the fence where my best interest as a student was not placed first. Instead, politics and selfish ideologies were. So when I said earlier that I wanted to extend my best wishes to the entire board, that wasn't simply a polite introduction. Rather, as a parent, my best wish and expectation from the 9 of you is for our students' best interest to come first instead of your personal beliefs, your personal feelings, and the topics discussed. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other public comments?
Yep. Catherine Williamson, G, my residence is 250 Wright Road. I have 4 children. 2 of them are still in the Washington Township School District. One is in Long Valley Middle School, the other one is West Morris Central. May I just check first, this public comment, is that recorded anywhere? It is? Where is the public comment recorded? Where is that information held?
So again, this is not a Q&A.
It's just a simple question
You have your 3 minutes. You have your 3 minutes.
Congratulations to all of the new oath takers this evening. We watched closely and are looking for solid, active and aligned leadership. And we expect all of you to uphold to the letter of the law the oath you just swore, and take this opportunity to remind all other elected public servants here of the same. You've heard many facts about how masks are ineffective, and I quote for the record, a May 2020 meta-study on pandemic influenza published by the US CDC found that face masks had no effect, neither as personal protective equipment, nor as a source control. I can provide you with 12 such studies if you require. And yet you are still choosing to mask our children. There is a gender of thought that is being disregarded, and that is attempted erosion of the rights of American men, women and families. It is further being eroded in our youth by encouraging obedience. By standing within the legal system, which is very different from the lawful system, you are potentially inadvertently acting from a place which is disempowering our children and creating a mental environment of fear and compliance. And this, to many of us, is repugnant. Government overreach is a sad reality, and I oppose this in every step I take by the God-given authority vested in my inalienable rights as a woman and the USA Constitution. Further, I assert for the property rights of every mother and father with regard to decisions they make for their progeny. We are very fortunate in America to have the Constitution to stand firmly upon, and it is time to see you doing the same.
30 seconds.
Regardless of any funding you may receive or insurance challenges, it's time to find the solutions and not hide behind the problems. I end this comment seeking that you support the local people's demand for a resolution from the Township Committee that was presented last night to give back the freedom of choice to the parents on whether to mask or unmask their children. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
John Olmixon, 194 Fairview Ave. I'm usually up here giving you guys a hard time about keeping our kids home, so I just want to give credit where credit is due, that after the holiday break, we didn't go all virtual. I know a lot of school districts, I have friends who's dealing with it right now, so I just want to say thanks for not going all virtual.
Alexandra Doherty, 82 Ann Road. I want to wish everybody a happy new year and also second what he said. I do appreciate that we are actually in school. That's huge. I know that, it's hard to do. Staffing is ridiculous right now. So I do appreciate that. I do want to make a comment about COVID policy. I did hear you say that you're exploring tests to stay. I have to say I do not agree with testing of asymptomatic individuals, but it's certainly better than causing harm to our kids by unnecessarily keeping kids at home. Tests to stay should be for all students identified as close contacts, not just our unvaccinated students. So if we're going to do this, let's do this correctly. We all, at this point, know somebody who is fully vaccinated and most likely boosted that has come down with COVID. So I think that's something for us to consider as a school district. Just to kind of back that up, according to the CDC, fully vaccinated individuals have only 35% greater protection. So 35% to me is not enough to, make these different policies for unvaccinated versus vaccinated students. Also, I want to just put it out there that I imagine that all of you are aware of the exclusion policy Middletown Public Schools has put in place. If you're not, I'd like to just briefly say that they've considered that if a student is identified as a close contact, that person can remain in school as long as they're asymptomatic, even without testing. So that's something for us to consider. I know that at the last meeting, insurance was mentioned. I urge the board and the district to look into why Middletown Public Schools is able to implement such a policy regarding exclusion and still retain insurance. We should be keeping our kids in school as much as possible. I don't think this is going anywhere. We just need to kind of work through it and keep our kids in school. Also, in the meantime, I urge the district to adopt a less stringent exclusionary COVID policies of the CDC instead of the guidelines that the New Jersey Department of Health has provided. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comments? Okay, then we are going to move on to district distinction. Oh, I'm sorry,
may-
I'm
no,
going to allow you time
no,
to respond.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So as we close public comment, again, I want to keep the commitment with the community to provide the responses as best I can to the public comments. I heard a theme from about 3 of the public comments, an appreciation of us being in person and coming back from our holiday break with full days of instruction. Thank you for acknowledging that, and let me use that as an opportunity to acknowledge our staff. The only reason we were able to do that is because our teachers came back, and it speaks to the amount of pride they have in our schools, and I couldn't be prouder of them, and also more appreciative of all of them. And it's also just not our teachers. I'm remiss to not mention our bus drivers, our school nurses, our principals, our aides, our central office staff. It's truly been a team effort, and I, as a newbie in the community, I feel truly blessed to be part of this team. So thank you for acknowledging them this evening. I know there was a question related to how these meetings are recorded. You can find them. They are on our website under the board meetings, and you can go through over several years, and you can find the public comments recorded. And our new website, I think they'll be more easily found, but they are up there on the website. To the comments specific to masks, I know this may not be the popular opinion in this room, but I do just have to agree to disagree on this, at least from my perspective on where we are right now. So I do continue to enforce and intend to enforce the mask mandate in our schools. I know that disappoints those who are present here tonight. The COVID policy comment on the test to stay, I will take that under advisement, and I'll consult with our local health department specific to the question of whether we should reconsider if moving in that direction, do we test also unvaccinated and vaccinated students? So that point is well taken. And specific to commenting on another district's approach, I just don't think that would be appropriate for me to make a comment on. So I hope I responded to the comments that I heard tonight appropriately. So thank you all for being here. It's a healthy sign that you all came out tonight, so thank you. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our president for district distinctions.
Thank you, Dr. Tanamian and Kelly. So tonight I have 2 district distinctions. I'd like to give a huge shout out to our school nurses and our bus drivers. Number 1, our nurses have spent so much time over break dealing with incoming COVID cases and quarantine times, and without our bus drivers showing up, we might not have been able to open. I just wanted to say that your dedication is greatly appreciated, and it shows immense heart and commitment, and I thank you all for that. We also have our Old Farmers Road kindergarten teacher, Jessica Toomey. Jessica has found a great way to incorporate technology into the classroom for her young learners while expanding their world and experiences. She's teamed up with Christine Pinto, who's a kindergarten teacher in Southern California. This duo has partnered their students with one another, and the children log into their Chromebooks and share information about their surroundings through a chat box. They quickly learn things like the difference in time zones and climates. They also learn how to take selfies or pictures and upload it into the chat. Having the children interact with others across the country really opens their world beyond their own community. It encourages their natural curiosity to ask questions to their buddies about what life is like in another part of the country. The teachers have also developed an activity for the children on spreadsheets which help the children learn about data collection and how people teach computers what to do. Both Christine and Jessica have written a book together about integrating tech and play with learning. They encourage other educators to follow their lead and help future classes broaden their foundational understanding of technology and the world around them. So I just wanted to say that's amazing, and thank you so much for all that you do for our children.
Thank you, Jess, for highlighting that. At this point, can I get a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night, everybody.